A much loved quote among executives, private equity firms, or really anyone in business is Edward Deming's, "In God we trust, all others bring data." And this is something that has become quite a bit of a mantra within the business world, again, to our detriment, because we become so obsessed with it that we can't make strategic decisions. We can't envision how to move forward without the data sets that we need. And we look to data for answers that it often doesn't have. So data is obviously incredibly valuable. It drives a lot of our decision-making behavior, and it has wonderful benefits. And those are things that we'll cover as well. We know what those benefits are. We know when we look at our past data, what it tells us about what's working or what's not working. We know how to use data to benchmark expectations. If I've got a call team that usually converts at 30%, and then suddenly we're converting at 20%, I know that there's probably something I need to do with the call team to get them back up to a higher conversion rate, but maybe not. And that's what we're going to talk about in this training, is moving beyond the data to become smarter and more strategic in our marketing campaigns. I think we've all heard this one: garbage in, garbage out. From the consulting side, working with so many executives, I can't tell you how often the data is terrible. It's unusable. Either the data is not there, or we're comparing apples to bananas in our data sets. What the marketing software is telling us versus what's being recorded in the CRM versus what accounting is pushing towards us. All completely different ways of categorizing information. So we're not comparing apples to apples. We're comparing apples to literally bananas or sometimes dogs. I mean, it's so far different that we can't make strategic decisions based off that data. But oftentimes the tracking is not even set up appropriately in the first place. I've gone into organizations where they will tell me with full confidence that they are getting a $150 cost per conversion off of their Google Ads campaigns. And then when we go in there, we find out that they're triple counting calls and inquiries, or they're counting a click as an inquiry rather than a call or a form fill as an inquiry. And so suddenly when we actually look at the real data, we find out that they're paying $2,000 an inquiry, which is completely unsustainable for almost any organization. And so things like these become critical when we're looking at our data. So part of our training will be looking at setting up the right systems and processes and how to track data appropriately, what tools to use, what software, what KPIs we should be managing. So we'll go into all of that, but obviously we just also always want to keep this in the back of our mind. Is the data that we have valid? Because we can't use invalid data to make a decision. So garbage in, garbage out is always important to think about. And then another one that's really critical is to avoid this analysis paralysis. And I love this quote by Bezos, but basically he said something along the lines, it seems to be different every time you get the quote from someone. If you wait until you know everything, you're probably too slow or too late. Most decisions only need about 70% of the information that you wish you had. And this is 100% accurate in my experience. You're never going to have perfect information. If we had perfect information, we could make perfect decisions, and then we'd all be super successful all the time. As we'll talk about in a bit, also at the end of the day, business and data is not a linear process. We can't scale things to the moon. It's not a math formula. We talked about in the introduction that we have this tendency to look at the formula and say, okay, number of patients times revenue reimbursement equals total revenue. Or if I'm looking at my inquiries, I take my total inquiries times front office desk, call center, whatever conversion rate equals number of new patients. Of course, these formulas are, in a simple sense, accurate, but they don't tell the whole story, and data is exactly the same. It only tells us part of the story. It doesn't tell us the how. One particular conversation that I probably have at least 2 or 3 times a week that always makes me chuckle is this idea that, like, well, we're looking to hire a new marketing agency, and we'll invest in marketing as much as it works, and we can just keep spending more and more money if it's effective. Well, of course, right? If we could just pay $1 and get $2 back, we would do that all the time. But business and life is nowhere near that easy. That's not how marketing works. It's not a math formula. We can't say, okay, we're getting a $100 CAC or $100 customer acquisition cost, client acquisition cost on our Google Ads campaign. And so if we spend $1,000, we'll get 10 customers. If we spend $10,000, we'll get 100 customers. What everyone finds out, often to their chagrin, is that it's not a math formula. It doesn't work that way. We can't scale things to the moon. Why is that? It's because of consumer dynamics. The number of searchers in a given market is limited. The number of people in crisis is limited. The ability of your call team, your front office desk person, your staff at the front desk talking to walk-ins, they all have different skill levels. The people that are coming in, your customers, your clients, your patients, they're different. They need different things. They want different things. Maybe you've got someone on the phone or someone at the front office that is great at talking to moms. But when dads come in, they have a 0% conversion rate because they don't know how to talk to dads. These are very real world issues that we're dealing with. There is no such thing as something that scales to the moon. I mean, obviously, if we could grow at 20% year over year all the time, or if we could get a marketing return at X amount of dollars all the time, we would scale that to the moon and we would all be fabulously wealthy and rich and we'd all have these multi-billion-dollar businesses. We don't. And the reason for that is because this isn't a math formula. It's not a linear line graph that's just going to go up by inputting dollars with X effort to get a particular return. So I want to take a look at some of the specifics on these and to help you think about different scenarios that are going to impact your ability to use data to get a future result. Number one, what got you here won't get you there. Another old adage that we've heard a million times. It's one that we tend to forget a surprising amount of the time. Let's take the scenario of a small business starting off that's growing to a larger organization. So let's say we're an individual provider. We're a doctor, we're a dentist, we're a therapist, whatever the situation is. And that individual finds as they start off that they don't need to pay money for marketing. Maybe they don't even need a website. All they do is they go and they start talking to people they know in the community because they probably have some level of respect and some level of awareness among the community already. And they say, hey, I'm opening up a family physician's office. I'm opening up a dental practice. I'm opening up a therapy office. And just by talking to people and getting to know people, they'll start getting patients in the door. And then after you get those patients in the door, assuming that they do a good job, those patients will go out and make recommendations and referrals. And they'll say, oh, you know what? I went to Janine and Janine did a great job with my treatment. And so I think you should go to her. And so suddenly you start getting more patients in. And so this individual provider, they say to themselves, well, look, I don't even need marketing, right? Even though they are marketing, right? They're actually leveraging their network. They're spending their time, if not their money, going and talking to people. But at the end of the day, they say, I just need to talk to people. I don't need to run Google Ads. I don't need to do search engine optimization. I don't even need a website. But they never get larger than themselves. They're stuck because all they can get is the referrals that they have in the community and their sweat equity, the amount of time they put in talking to people, which takes away from the time that they're actually able to deliver services and get paid. So eventually someone hits a cap where they're not able to put in any more time and deliver services, and so they stay a small individual provider. The next level up might be someone who says, okay, well, I do want to grow. I actually want to hire people under me, and I'd like to do more office management rather than direct client care. I'd like to grow this business. And so they invest in, let's say, Google Ads. And so same thing happens. So they find that through a little bit of networking, they encourage their providers or their employees that they're working with to do a little bit of networking. That gets them so far, but they're not full. They're actually ending up having to pay people full time without having a full-time schedule of patients coming in. So they're losing money. So they decide that they better invest in marketing. And so they go to Google Ads, and Google Ads is a great early marketing channel because it's high intent individuals. These are people that want a service and they want it now. Why am I searching for a therapist for depression? Why am I searching for a new physician for my child? Why am I searching for a physical therapist or a dentist? I'm searching for these things because I want to utilize this service now. So they do the same thing. They say, well, look at that. I was able to grow to 2 employees And so I've got myself and 2 employees under me, and all I had to do was Google Ads. Well, now again, we're stuck in this situation because there is a cap on the search volume in a particular area. And at each of these points, they're taking data and making assumptions that it's scalable when it's not. And then secondarily, their past data says nothing about what they can do in the future. So for our first individual provider, they've got the referrals, but they're not able to grow past it. So what do they do now? Maybe they run some Facebook campaigns. Maybe they start doing social media. Maybe they even invest in a billboard, and they find that nothing's helping them grow their business. They don't know where to go because they have no data within their organization, their business, and their life experience that tells them which channel to be on, how much money to invest in that channel, or what to do on that channel. So maybe our individual provider, after a lot of trial and error, kind of stumbles across the Google Ads thing, or they talk to a good agency and that agency knows already how to market for that particular provider type and service line. And so they just get them going. But then they get stuck again at the second level where at the Google Ads, they want to grow again. They want to hire some more staff, but there's just not enough search volume coming from the Google Ads, or the Google Ads are too expensive to really be sustainable. Again, we don't have data that's predicting the future and telling us where to go. So I've already exhausted my referral network. We've exhausted the search volume in Google Ads. What next? Maybe I invest in Facebook. Maybe it's TikTok. Maybe it's TV. Maybe it's social media. Maybe I hire a second person to do boots on the ground outreach. But then what do these people do, or what am I supposed to do on that channel? The way that you run a Google ad is completely different than the way you run a Facebook campaign. It's completely different from the way you think about an email campaign or a billboard campaign. And so they have no data within their organization to suggest where to go next or what to do on those different channels. They don't know the what or the how. They don't know how much money to spend for it to be effective. They don't know how much time to give it. Is it going to take a week, a month, 3 months? Like, what do I have to do? What got you here won't get you there. And there's no data in your past to help you grow and scale. So it's really, really important to remember. Now, we also see this really consistently in new markets when we're working with larger providers that are just starting to expand for the first time or maybe adding on a service line. We see the same thing often with a private equity acquisition where they buy an established provider and then they want to scale it across the country or across the state and they want to do it rapidly. And what happens in these situations is when they move into this new market, it doesn't work. And so they've got all this past data that says, oh, look, we're running these campaigns on Google Ads. Here's our billboards. Here's our television campaigns. Here's where outreach reps are doing. And so we're just going to replicate that, copy paste it, plop it down, and I'm sure it'll work. It doesn't. Why not? Because it's a completely new market. Your data set as an existing provider where you spent a decade building relationships, becoming known in the community is not going to translate to a new market where nobody knows you. Not only does nobody know you in the new market, but there's already established providers there most of the time. So you're not just going into a new market and having to build awareness and educate people to let them know you're there. You are actually having to work uphill and compete against people that are already known and trusted. I've got a family physician I've been going to for 20 years. I sent my kids there. My kids will probably send their kids there, right? So why you as a brand new provider coming in, am I going to want to go to you? If there is a demand and supply imbalance, if there is a shortfall in the number or the amount of supply in a given area, yeah, you can go in. That's why dental practices are so easy. The failure rate on a dental clinic is like 2%. It's one of the most successful businesses in the US at any given time. Currently, psychiatric practices are by and large incredibly successful just because there is a very high demand and a very limited supply. But as we know, within any kind of capitalist economy, that disappears over time. As people see the opportunity, more people get into it, and then competition increases, and then suddenly you do not have the same demand or supply-demand imbalance, and so it becomes much, much harder to operate. Well, this new market, again, we've got no data set that tells us what to do in the new market because we haven't done it before, and maybe the patient base is different in that market. Maybe the reimbursement structure is different in that market. So maybe I was running really high-cost Google Ads campaigns that ended up being profitable, even though they're high cost. I make 20% less in my new market based on the average insurance reimbursement that we're getting. And so Google Ads aren't actually sustainable in this market. So what do? I've got no data in the past. The diminishing returns we've talked about is pretty critical. And we want to think about, as we're kind of reaching different tiers of people or different types of people, our numbers are going to change. So real easy example that I was actually just talking about with a larger client of ours down in northern Florida. They have a lot of different facilities across the whole north of Florida. And so we spend around $150,000 a month just on their digital campaigns. And when we look at their digital campaigns and we look at how much of it is allocated to Google Ads versus other channels, what we find in a month-by-month comparison, which is really common across a lot of our clients in different verticals and service lines, is that their conversion rate from their call team goes down the more money they're spending on Google Ads. Now, why would that be? It's very simple. It's all about psychology. It's all about strategy. So on Google Ads, the vast majority of people that you are getting to click and call into a provider, whatever your service line is, are people that don't know where to go. Right? If they knew who you were, if they had a certain level of trust in you already, they would probably know the name, search you by name, and give you a call to see if you're the right fit for their particular needs at the time. But if they don't know where to go, they do a general Google search and they click on an ad. And most people that click on an ad like literally spend less than 30 seconds on your website before they give you a call. So they know nothing about you. They have no trust really built up. They're literally just clicking off an ad that they thought about for 30 seconds. And so the conversion rate on that individual is going to be significantly lower than someone who, say, saw your billboard every day for a month, or saw several of your Facebook ad campaigns, many of them which were educational, and so I had taught them many things that they didn't know before. So these individuals, when they do a search for you or give you a call and get your phone number, they're pre-sold. They already have a certain level of trust that's built up. So these are much easier conversions for the team. They're more committed to going to you specifically than someone who's just calling a random Google ad. So in this sense, our conversion rate is data that is not necessarily predictive of the future. If we really understand the story the data is telling, then we can start to understand why our conversion rate might drop. But another provider might think, oh, my conversion rate's going down. My team must be getting worse. I must not be providing the training. We must have had some new hires that aren't good. The data the story tells can be very different. Again, we use our front office receptionist example where they're very good at talking to moms, but very bad at talking to dads. So if I start running marketing campaigns that are appealing more to dads, well, now my conversion rate's going to go down. Is it because the ads are bad? Or is it because the front receptionist doesn't know how to talk to this new demographic coming in? There's a lot of things that the data could potentially be telling us, but at the same time, that real simple data set of conversion rate doesn't tell the whole story, and it often can't tell the whole story. There's no way I can look at a conversion rate and just go, oh, it's probably because we have more men coming in now than we used to. No one's going to see that in the data unless they're actually matching demographic data to the calls that are coming in and noticing that trend. The reality of trying to track everything is unrealistic. And so we're not always going to understand what's going on, especially with this idea of diminishing returns. As we push out a channel, it's less and less likely to be successful over time because we tap out that channel, or we become less successful because we start to reach a new demographic. Different customers, we just talked about that. Lots of challenges with it. Another one I like to talk about is a call team. So I think we mentioned it in the introduction, where for small businesses, like if we got this individual provider or even a very small provider with a couple of employees, they're often dealing with crises. And so a crisis call is transactional. It's very easy. Oh, you have this going on? Yes, we can come and we can help you. Let's move forward with that. Whereas once you get bigger, then you need to expand your customer base outside of just crisis calls. And so these are individuals that are thinking about very smartly where they want to go or where they want to send a loved one. So they're going to call around. They're going to talk to 5 different providers. Again, very different conversation that I'm going to have, or that I have to have as a front desk receptionist, as someone answering the phone, with someone that's comparing us to 5 other places versus I'm in crisis, I just need to get in. Do you have availability? Thank God, please let me in. Also, things just like availability are really important that will affect our data sets. So a good example I had is I had a cavity. I had a sore tooth about a year ago. And so what it is, I called around, and really I just needed someone to get me in right away because it was quite painful. So I called one place and they said, yes, we have availability. We can schedule you not until tomorrow at 4 o'clock. I was like, well, geez, this really hurts today. Put me down, right? I want to get in. But of course I called around and talked to other places. I found someone else that was able to get me in within 2 hours. And so I went to that other place. And so you have a positive conversion there. The front desk receptionist did a fine job of having a transactional call with me, but because there wasn't the availability, or I was able to find earlier availability somewhere else, then that guided my decision in that process. Where in the data are you going to see that? Unless you're tracking kind of appointment time based on when the call came in, you're not going to see that. So our data is not always going to be able to tell us exactly where we need to go or what we need to do. And even if we expand all these other data sets, it's not always going to give us perfect information. Great example is this Old Spice body wash campaign. There is a ton of debate around did it or did it not work? So let's look at some of the data. Let's look at some of the numbers here. 300% increase in traffic to the website. Wow, they tripled their website traffic. That's great. So if the conversion rate remains stable, then we would have a huge uptick in sales, supposedly. 2,000% increase in Twitter followers. So massive increase in Twitter followers, great. And super important question. At the end of the day, who cares about the Twitter followers? Who cares about traffic to the website unless it's converting to sales? So we find that sales doubled within 6 months. Phenomenal. This seems to be like it was a really successful campaign. So Nick, why are you saying this is up for debate? Well, in 12 months, sales were down 7% compared to the prior year. So even though they had a massive uptick in sales, when they compare it year over year, they had a 7% drop. Now, really important as you get into the nitty gritty of the data, a couple of places ran analyses around competitors like Axe Body Wash, for example, or Gillette Head of Body Wash. And every single competitor in that market ran a BOGO campaign at the same time. So buy one, get one free. Old Spice Body Wash ran this buy one, get one free campaign at the same time that they released this ad. So now we've got confounding information in the data set. Were original uptick in sales driven by the ad, or were they driven by buy one, get one free? Because buy one, get one free drives massive sales activities. I don't care what you're selling. Now, when they compared Old Spice versus some of these more established competitors in the marketplace, they found that Old Spice only had about half the amount of increase as these other competitors. The competitors didn't have an amazing ad campaign. All they had was their BOGO coupons that they had sent out via direct mail. So, by a couple of these other metrics, it appears that maybe the Old Spice campaign wasn't overly successful. And I do want to point out that brand piece because we see that consistently across clients in various verticals. If we've got a client that's well established in the market, we're going to run campaigns that are often twice as successful as if we're running with a new provider in a similar market. Why is that? Because the established provider has a reputation. People know them. They trust them. If I run an X campaign, if I run a Twitter campaign and I show it to an established market that knows our client, that's the 7th, 8th, or 9th time they've seen our client. They've heard about it from their doctor, their friends have mentioned it before, maybe they saw a TV ad for it. So when we run the X campaign, they're like, oh yeah, I know those people. I trust them. I'm going to give them a call because right now, I just happen to need this service. Versus a brand new provider who no one's ever heard of, they see our X campaign and they're like, well, I don't know who these guys are. Who cares? I'm going to skip past this. So we're going to have twice the amount of success with an established provider that has a good reputation versus one who has no reputation. So this reputation component is critical to the success of a marketing campaign. Again, marketing is a dependent variable. It is not independent. It just doesn't work automatically, right? If I sell and market coffee for Starbucks, it could be much more successful than if I just market coffee for a random coffee shop. We always want to keep that in mind. So, as we look at this, data it can tell contrasting stories. It's not clear. It doesn't provide as much certainty as we would like it to. So we always want to start with the data because there's so much value to it, but we want to remember that it's only part of the story. It's not going to tell us exactly what we need to do. It often can't tell us because we don't have anything in our past data that is predictive for where we need to go in the future. And again, this is really critical as organizations scale. The individual provider reliant on referrals doesn't know where to go next. Okay, they figure out the Google Ads piece. So now they've got Google Ads and they've got individual networking. That's no longer working to help them grow and scale. Where do they go next? There's nothing in the past data. My conversion rates are changing. Why? Suddenly I'm talking to different demographics, different tiers of consumers, different types of consumers. That's going to change how my call team needs to interact, which isn't going to be told just within a conversion rate story, or at least it's very, very hard to suss out exactly what the data potentially can be telling us. So as we go through the rest of this training, we'll talk a lot about what works in data and how to track it and how to make sure it's accurate, how to make sure that we have the tools in place to get the right data so we don't have garbage coming into it. But at the same time, we still want to be thinking about the human psychology component, the tactics component, and the strategy component, because those are at least as important as the data.